You are tuned to the Just Don't Quit broadcast network.
This is Randall at JustDon'tQuit.com, and we're the only ones coming to you live at Sundance after the documentary I'm Pat Tillman. We're with director Amir Bar-Lev and Pat Tillman's mom and brother backstage as they get ready to be warmly greeted at the audience Q&A deep into the night at Sundance.
Yeah, I mean, we of course tried to get their perspective. The question was, the perspective of the shooters, and the answer is they weren't willing to speak, and unfortunately, they've never been compelled to speak in a real court of law, and that's not an accident. Had they been, court-martialed, as they probably should have been, as they definitely should have been, they would have opened up a can of worms for the military and shone a light on all these other aspects. So that's why they were just given slaps on the wrists. And that's, very frustrating. I think I can speak for the Tillmans. That's a lasting injustice in this case.
I have one question for the Tillmans. Did you guys approach the director, or did he approach you about this movie?
Actually, Amir was at the first congressional hearing. That was April 27th, 2007. 24th, sorry, April 24th, which was Amir's birthday. Yeah. And he came to that hearing, and he was very interested in doing a documentary. And my daughter-in-law, Marie, is the literary heir to Pat, and so she's the one who ultimately decided to go along and help Amir with this project, and we've all chipped in.
By interested, she means pushy. And I'll just tell one other little anecdote, which I think speaks to Danny Tillman's character. It just so happened that I mentioned it was my birthday because, and somehow, it just by coincidence, it took us a year later to do our first day of shooting with Danny, and we showed up to her house with this massive crew, and I was, kind of nervous because we were going to comment, when you do that, you end up sort of displacing half the items in the house, and Danny came out with bagels for my whole crew and a birthday present for me. And I turned to my crew and I said, who told her it was my birthday? We're trying to tread lightly here. And Danny had remembered from a year earlier that on this, literally about 3 minutes that we met, you remembered, somehow it had come up that it was my birthday. And it's Richard's birthday tonight. Happy birthday. Any more birthday-related questions? Yeah, yep, in the middle there.
So, watching the film, it seems that the family really wants to go through this privately, and it's odd to watch the film because, of course, it's so public. So, if there was a movement, of course, that I think everybody wants to probably promote at this point, what do you want? I mean, what if everyone got together behind you? What's justice, or what's let us put this behind you?
Well, I think that clearly Congress was a wash. I mean, they were no help at all. We had high hopes, and they proved to be extremely incompetent. The Republicans didn't care, and the Democrats were just incompetent, and so both factions, unfortunately, let us down, let Pat down. But it's not, the thing that I think, the reason we went through with all of this was not just because we wanted justice for Pat. This behavior is pervasive in the military. They lie on a regular basis about the circumstances of soldiers' deaths. And, the public really does need to be vigilant about paying attention to what the government is doing, because you are the voice of the soldiers. My sons said this when they enlisted. They talked about the fact they were giving up their voice. And that's what happens when you join the military. We are their voice. They give away rights when they join the military. They're fighting for our rights, but they give up their own. And so we have to pay attention to what our government is doing. So a public outcry would be the most powerful thing, because our senators and our congressmen, they're not paying attention. So yeah, if you guys could all write a letter and say you want answers, that would be the most powerful approach, I think.
When this story first broke, the implication was that one of Pat's superiors had it in for him and that he may have been sent on this mission in this canyon by design. That's just my recollection from a few years back. Was there ever any suggestion of that?
Okay, I mean, you know, the thing is that I'll answer that by backing up a couple steps. When the story first broke, 5 weeks after, when the friendly fire first broke, the military put out into the world this notion that it was a fog of war, you know, and that's pretty much, I know that when I approached this story, that's kind of what I had in my mind, that, you know, sort of some born on the 4th of July kind of thing, that it was this chaotic situation and he was caught by an errant bullet. That was a cleverly constructed lie on the part of the military to kind of cover the shooters and to cover themselves and cover the higher ups. Like, we weren't quite sure what had happened. It was so chaotic there. As I hope you see in the film, that's really not the case. And that's another thing we're hoping this film does, is to kind of, like, you know, change that part of the Tillman story. And in fact, the actions of the shooters are so negligent, so criminally negligent, that it does make some people wonder, how is it possible that this was an accident? But, you know, if you start to really look into it, I think you find it almost impossible to believe that it was an accident, and even more impossible to believe that it was like an assassination or anything. There is really no evidence to support that, I mean, that we found anyway. And as Stan Goff says in an outtake, it's not in the film, but he said, you know, the military would like nothing more than for the argument to be, was this an assassination? Because then they can just pin, you know, their detractors as, you know, conspiracy nutcases. So anyway, that's my personal belief. You know, I know that probably almost anybody who looks into this might conclude something differently. Do you want to add anything? No? Or yes?
One thing that's really interesting is Richard actually, before we ever learned that it was a fratricide, he always questioned the story that you know, the military gave us. He said, it's too perfect, the story's too perfect, and Pat wasn't that stupid. He wouldn't go running up some hill, you know, with the enemy shooting at him like that. And so it made more sense that he was actually killed the way he was, in a way. And so when we started looking through the documents, and all of a sudden the autopsy didn't make any sense, and the field hospital report said that he was receiving CPR when he'd already been pronounced dead 2 hours earlier. And many of the documents indicated he really had no head. Extremely frustrating for us, because we would show this evidence to people and they would look at us like, so what? I mean, they wouldn't respond. So, you know, Amir is really correct. It's like, it couldn't have been a fog of war. We don't think it was an assassination, but we do think it was gross negligence, and his death was used for propaganda to promote the war, which was absolutely immoral.
I mean, you know, it's just, I urge you to, like, use a stopwatch or something when you get home and look at what a minute is, you know, and it was either a minute, it was between a minute and 2 minutes they were shooting from from between 140 meters away, which is nothing. So, you know, it's really hard to understand, and it was something we struggled with, because, you know, you make a film, you want it to draw conclusions, and it's very hard to conclude what was going through these people's minds. But again, they haven't been forced to answer in a court of law, so.